Rook's day was just getting worse. As the self-appointed leader of the Gyrfalcon station, he'd expected many things. Faulty eyes through her helmet visor at the oppressive glare. Whoever said space travel was glamorous had obviously never set foot on an alien world where the nearest thing to shade was a rock formation that looked suspiciously like a middle finger. "Why'd we sign up for this again?" grumbled Sykes, the team's resident cynic, whose appreciation for sarcasm was second only to his hatred of manual labor. He was currently using a scanner that was about as reliable as a politician's promise. "I could be back on Earth, sipping a martini, but no, here I am scanning rocks." "Because, my dear Sykes," Leora replied, her voice dripping with the kind of cheer that could only come from extensive caffeine abuse, "the universe is vast, mysterious, and full of opportunities for humanity to screw things up on a galactic scale. Their little team comprised the finest misfits the Earth Exploration Corps could muster. There was Kelly, who could fix anything so long as it was made of scrap metal and duct tape. And then there was Jax, a biologist with a fondness for alien fauna that couldn't be classified as mostly harmless. "I think this crystal forest is going to make us famous," Jax said, crouching down to inspect one of the shimmering structures that jutted from the ground like oversized stalagmites. "I mean, just look at these formations." "Great," Kelly muttered, adjusting her toolkit. "First they send us to a planet that looks like a unicorn threw up all over it. Then they expect us to make friends with the locals." Locals being the Zyathans, a species known for their inscrutable expressions and the alarming tendency to communicate through what looked like interpretive dance. So far, diplomatic relations had gone about as well as you'd expect when interspecies communication involved jazz hands. "Speaking of locals," Leora said, tapping her comms unit, "Earth wants a status update. Sykes, give them a taste of life in the alien trenches." Sykes sighed, pulling out the transmission control. "Earth Command, this is Sykes, reporting from Viridia. The crystal forest is, well, it's here. Team's intact, no one's been eaten by the flora yet. Though with Jax's luck it's only a matter of time, over and out." Leora chuckled, shaking her head. "Not very professional, but it'll do." A minute later, the comms unit chimed back with an unfamiliar static. "Earth Command confirms receipt, Sykes, and might we add, your charm is as enduring as a cockroach." "Over. Looks like Command's awfully relaxed today," Kelly noted, fiddling with her toolkit. "Or maybe they've just given up on us," Sykes replied, his tone as dry as the dust coating their boots. As they trudged further into the crystalline expanse, the structures began to hum, a soft resonance that tickled the back of Leora's skull. "This place gives me the creeps," she admitted, more to herself than anyone else. "Creeps are better than getting shot at," Kelly pointed out, ever the optimist in a team full of pessimists. "Remember that time on Craxus? The one with the giant turtles with lasers strapped to their shells?" Jax asked, clearly reminiscing fondly about a near-death experience. "Yeah," Kelly said, shaking her head. "I still get nightmares." "Nightmares are for people with time to dream," Sykes said, as they reached the heart of the forest. The crystals here were taller, more vibrant, each one a different shade of what Leora could only describe as damn near blinding. "This section's vibrating more than the others," Jax noted, his scanner beeping furiously. "Could be some kind of energy source. Or maybe it's just trying to give us a headache." "Or maybe," Leora said, peering through the shimmering haze, "it's a sign that we're not alone." As if on cue, a figure emerged from the crystalline shadows. Tall, lanky, and distinctly Zyathan, it moved with the awkward grace of a marionette, its limbs articulating in a way that should have been anatomically impossible. "Here we go," Sykes muttered, folding his arms. "Time for another episode of Let's Not Offend the Locals." The Zyathan approached, its face a smooth, featureless plane except for the hint of iridescence near what might have been its mouth. It gestured wildly, its arms tracing intricate patterns in the air. "I think it's trying to tell us something," Jax said, his eyes wide with academic delight. "Maybe it's the secret to the universe. Or maybe it's just asking for directions," Kelly suggested, her skepticism firmly in place. Leora watched as the Xiathans' dance grew more frantic. "Sykes, get ready to transmit. I think it wants to talk." "Roger that," Sykes said, already tapping at the comms unit. "Let's hope my charming demeanor doesn't start an interstellar incident." The Xiathan's gestures slowed, its head tilting in a manner that might have indicated curiosity or indigestion. Leora stepped forward, raising her arms in what she hoped was a neutral, friendly gesture. "Greetings," she began, speaking slowly as if that might help. "We come in peace." The Xiathan's response was a series of rapid, fluid motions that made Leora's head spin just watching. She could almost feel the confusion washing over the alien. "Well, that cleared things up," Kelly said dryly. "I don't think we should assume it's hostile," Jack suggested. "Maybe it's just culturally different." "Yeah," Sykes said, rolling his eyes. "Like the difference between a house cat and a velociraptor." Leora nodded, watching the Xiathan intently. "Keep the channel open. Maybe it'll catch on." As they stood there in awkward silence, the Xiathan finally stopped its wild gesturing. For a long moment it simply stared at them, or at least it seemed like it was staring. Hard to tell with no eyes. Finally it tapped its chest, a light flickering beneath its skin. "CRRR, Voss," it said, imitating Leora's earlier introduction. "Progress," Jax declared, beaming as if he just solved the galaxy's biggest puzzle. Leora smiled, feeling a spark of hope. "Yes, Voss," she confirmed, tapping her own chest. "Captain Leora Voss." "Voss," the Xiathan repeated, a strange sort of satisfaction in its voice, and then it began to hum. Softly at first, the sound rising and falling in a haunting melody that resonated through the crystal forest. "What's it doing?" Kelly asked, taking a step back as the crystals around them began to pulse in time with the sound. "Maybe it's calling for reinforcements," Sykes suggested, though there was a hint of doubt in his voice. The hum echoed louder, the crystals gleaming with a light that seemed to come from within. Leora felt an uneasy thrill race down her spine. "I think," she said slowly, "it's trying to talk to us." But before she could elaborate, the comms unit crackled to life with an unexpected transmission, this one definitely not from Earth. "Voss, declaration, war," it sputtered in a broken mimicry of human language. "Wait, what?" Sykes blurted, his eyes wide. "Did it just say war?" Leora stared at the Xiathan, whose face remained impassive. "Oh hell," she muttered. "Sykes, what did you say in that last transmission?" Sykes scratched his head. "Nothing much. Just that the flora here hasn't eaten us yet." "Congratulations," Kelly said, clapping him on the back. "You might have just declared war on behalf of the entire human race." The Xiathan's hum continued, each note vibrating through the air like the prelude to something big and ugly. "Looks like Earth needs a lesson in what not to say to aliens," Jax commented with grim amusement. "No kidding," Leora said, her mind racing. "Okay, damage control time. Sykes, get command on the line. Let's see if we can unscrew this mess before it gets any worse." "On it," Sykes said, his fingers flying over the controls. Leora turned back to the Xiathan, who was still humming away. "We need to fix this, fast." The alien stopped its melody abruptly, tilting its head once more. "Voss, peace," it said, the word hanging in the air like a question. Leora's heart skipped a beat. "Yes," she replied quickly, forcing a smile. "Peace." The Xiathan paused as if considering her response. Then, to everyone's surprise, it nodded, a slow, deliberate motion that spoke volumes. "Well," Kelly said, breaking the tension with a relieved laugh, "that was almost a diplomatic disaster." "Almost," Jax agreed, exhaling deeply. "But it seems we're not dead yet." Sykes shot Leora a wry smile. "Guess my charming personality saved the day after all." "Sure," Leora replied, patting him on the shoulder. "Let's stick with that story when we explain this to command." As the crystal forest settled back into its eerie serenity, Leora knew one thing for certain. If this was just the beginning, their mission on Viridia was going to be anything but boring. The Xiathans, however, had other plans. Deep within the labyrinth of their crystal cathedrals, Commander Zarlik stood before a council of his kind and gesticulated wildly. limbs flailing in what could only be described as a cross between a fan dance and a seizure. The council responded in kind, limbs and head nodding in syncopation. An alien consensus reached through the art of avant-garde choreography. They had decided the humans were planning an invasion, and they'd be damned if they'd let a bunch of hairless apes take what was theirs. "Zarlix," said one of the council members, an elder with movements as sharp as a broken bottle, "this Voss cannot be trusted. Their arrival must be a precursor to war." Zarlix nodded, his confidence bolstered by his peers' agreement. Indeed, their message was clear. They intend to consume our flora. We must prepare for the worst. Meanwhile, in the Crystal Forest, blissfully unaware of the impending interstellar conflict their words had sparked, Captain Leora Voss and her motley crew continued their exploration, as oblivious as a hedgehog in a balloon factory. "So," Sykes said, glancing around at the sparkling scenery, "what's the plan? We wander around until something eats us, or do we try and find some more friendly locals?" Leora shrugged, shading her eyes against the glare of the crystals. "Let's keep moving and hope the next Xiathan we meet is as chatty as the last one. Maybe we can convince them we're not here to steal their precious rocks. Or maybe they are right, and we're just in denial," Kelly said, squinting at a nearby formation that looked suspiciously like a middle finger. "I mean, how many alien planets have we landed on without someone getting the wrong idea? To be fair," Jax cut in, "we've been wrong more often than right. Remember the time on Epsilon VI when we mistook a ceremonial dance for a threat display?" "Ah, yes," Sykes replied with a smirk, "and then had to run for our lives when the real threat showed up, a six-legged bear with a bad attitude." "Good times," Leora said dryly. "Let's try not to repeat history yet. Keep those scanners running, Jax." "Already on it," Jax replied, fiddling with the settings on his device. "Just hope it doesn't decide to explode." Again, as they trekked deeper into the forest, the air grew thicker, the light dimmer. An ominous hum, like the world's most anxious beehive, rose around them. The crystals seemed to be vibrating with anticipation, or maybe it was just the caffeine in Leora's veins making her jittery. "Anyone else feel like we're being watched?" Kelly asked, her voice a low whisper. "Only all the time," Sykes replied. "It's called paranoia, comes free with the job. Or maybe," Jax suggested, "the crystals are actually alive and we're standing in the middle of an ancient gathering ground. You know, just to add some spice to our already thrilling lives." "Not helping, Jax," Leora said, scanning the area with a wary eye. "But let's keep moving. I'd rather not be around if these rocks decide they don't like us." Back at the Xiathan Council, preparations were underway. Crystals were being calibrated, their harmonious frequencies tuned to unsettling dissonance, ready to unleash chaos upon the uninvited guests. Zarlix, in his infinite wisdom, had devised a plan that was sure to send shivers down any spine capable of shivering. "We'll lure them into the heart of the forest," Zarlix explained, his gestures sharp and decisive. "Then we'll activate the crystalline defense grid. It'll be over before they can say interpretive dance." The council applauded silently, their approval expressed through a series of intricate nods and waves. The preparations were nearly complete, and soon the humans would understand the folly of their invasion. Back with Leora's team, oblivion was bliss and ignorance a warm, comforting blanket. They continued onward, blissfully unaware of the danger converging upon them. "So," Leora said, trying to lighten the mood, "any bets on how this ends?" "I'm thinking peaceful resolution, maybe a nice sit-down with the Xiathans over some alien tea. More like a swift kick to the shuttle and a hasty retreat," Sykes said, his pessimism as consistent as ever. "Come on," Jax chimed in. "Maybe we'll find a way to communicate, strike up a friendship. I mean, we can't be the only ones who enjoy a good interstellar debacle." Kelly snorted. "Interstellar debacle. That's putting it mildly, more like a cosmic screw-up. But hey, I'm all for optimism, especially if it keeps us alive." As they bantered, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. A low rumble echoed through the forest, the crystals pulsing in response. Ugh, guys, Kelly said, stopping in her tracks. Tell me that's your stomach, Jax. Jax shook his head, eyes wide. Not this time. I think we've got company. The rumble grew louder, a cacophony of sound and vibration that rattled their bones. From the shadows, figures emerged, tall, lean, and decidedly displeased Zyathans, their limbs weaving a tapestry of threat and command. Well, Leora said, drawing herself up, looks like we're about to get that meeting after all. Sykes groaned. Great. I didn't even bring my dancing shoes. The Zyathans closed in, their leader stepping forward with all the grace of a predatory crane. It was Zarlix himself, his movements sharp and cutting as he appraised the humans before him. Vas, Zarlix intoned, each syllable a knife thrown with deadly precision. You come here with threats and war. Leora opened her mouth to protest, but Zarlix silenced her with a wave of his hand, the motion like a blade slicing through the air. Your presence here is an affront, a declaration of hostility, but we are prepared. Prepared? Sykes muttered. Great, they know us better than command does. Wait, Leora said, raising her hands in a placating gesture. We don't mean any harm, honest. Just a big misunderstanding. Misunderstanding, Zarlix repeated, the word tasting foreign in his mouth. Your message was clear, you seek to destroy. Kelly shot Sykes a look. Nice going, they think we want to wipe them out. Not my fault, Sykes grumbled. I was just trying to be charming. Time to work some of that patented charm then, Leora said, her voice low. See if you can convince them we're not out to ruin their day. I'll do my best, Sykes replied, stepping forward. He flashed what he hoped was a reassuring smile, though it probably looked more like a grimace. Commander Zarlix, was it? Look, we're just here to explore. No harm, no foul, right? Zarlix's eyes narrowed, though the gesture was more implied than visible. Your words ring false, human. We are not so easily deceived. Well, can't blame a guy for trying, Sykes said, turning back to Leora. Any other bright ideas, Captain? Leora suppressed a sigh. Keep talking. Maybe they'll get bored and leave us alone. Or Kelly offered, we could try the universal sign for peace. And what would that be? Jax asked, genuinely curious. Kelly grinned. A white flag, obviously. Too bad we didn't pack any. The Zyathans began to shift restlessly, their patience wearing thin. Zarlix raised a hand, a signal that sent the air vibrating with tension. Now would be a good time to think of something, Leora said, urgency creeping into her voice. But before any of them could respond, the ground beneath their feet erupted in light, a brilliant display of refracted colors that made their stomachs lurch and their eyes water. What's happening? Jax shouted over the din, trying to maintain his balance. Looks like Plan B, Sykes said, grim resignation in his voice. Run, and run they did, feet pounding against the trembling earth as the Zyathans' crystalline defenses activated, the air alive with the hum of alien technology. Where the hell are we going? Kelly gasped, her toolkit bouncing against her hip as they sprinted. Away from here, Leora replied, glancing over her shoulder. Anywhere but here. Great, Jax huffed, struggling to keep up. Another day, another death-defying escape. Back at the Zyathan Council, Zarlix watched the humans retreat with an expression that could only be described as smug satisfaction. The humans might be wily, but they had underestimated the Zyathans' resolve. Let them run, Zarlix declared, his movements slow and deliberate. We will await their return. And when they do, they will find us ready. As the humans raced through the crystal forest, dodging beams of light and narrowly avoiding the odd crystalline spike, Leora couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of their situation. So much for a peaceful mission. Next time, she called over her shoulder, remind me to pack some dance lessons. Might help us avoid another diplomatic mix-up. Sykes grunted in agreement, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Yeah, maybe add synchronized swimming to the list too, just in case. Assuming there is a next time, Kelly said, her voice barely audible over the chaos. Leora didn't respond, too focused on the task of keeping her team alive, but she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this was only the beginning. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. Viridia had more surprises in store for them, and none of them were likely to be pleasant. As they stumbled into a clearing, illuminated by the harsh light of Viridia's sun filtering through the crystals, Leora knew they couldn't run forever. But for now, it would have to do. They'd regroup, assess, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to fix the mess they'd unwittingly made. And if not, well, at least they'd go down swinging. The universe, expansive and indifferent, had a way of bending even the simplest plans into convoluted knots. Leora Voss knew that all too well, especially as she and her ragtag crew dashed deeper into Viridia's crystal forest. Behind them, the Xythans were turning the concept of miscommunication into a near-lethal art form. Who knew interpretive dance could be weaponized? As they ran, crystals overhead shimmered with a malevolent beauty, like chandeliers at a fancy party none of them were invited to. The Xythans had initiated some kind of aggressive maneuver, or maybe just an elaborate dance number. Either way, it was time to move before everyone got an unplanned laser show. Next time we accidentally crash a diplomatic mission, let's make sure the locals aren't trained in guerrilla ballet, Jax panted, narrowly avoiding a particularly sharp crystal jutting out of the ground. Jax, buddy, Sykes replied between gasps. I'm pretty sure the first step is to stop crashing diplomatic missions. Baby steps, huh? The ground vibrated with the rhythmic pounding of feet, both human and Xythan, and the occasional blast of light that cut through the air like an angry laser pointer. The Xythans' interpretive methods might have been breathtaking in another context, but right now it was like being chased by a well-choreographed wrath. Don't suppose anyone's got a plan B, Kelly huffed, weapon clutched tight, mostly for comfort at this point. Or even a plan that doesn't involve us running like chickens. Leora glanced around, brain whirring like an outdated hard drive. Well, there's always the option of surrendering. You know, wave the white flag and hope for the best. Sykes snorted, sidestepping another crystal. Sure. Just as long as by white flag you mean let's keep running until they get tired. Don't underestimate the power of a good cardio session, Jax added, the grin audible in his voice. They ducked and weaved, dodging both the Xythans' more enthusiastic gestures and the occasional errant rock that seemed determined to trip them up. If nothing else, Viridia had a sense of drama, dark, foreboding, and with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Can someone explain why they're so pissed? Kelly asked, voice laced with frustration and the faintest hint of hysteria. Could be our charming personalities, Sykes suggested. Or maybe they don't like uninvited guests poking around their backyard. Hard to say. Yeah, well, maybe their yard shouldn't look so damn inviting, Jax retorted. Last I checked, putting out a welcome mat didn't mean prepare for annihilation. Their path took them through yet another clearing, where the sunlight broke through in harsh, unforgiving rays. Crystal shards created a kaleidoscope of color across the ground, pretty enough to make the heart ache, assuming one had time to appreciate the scenery before being skewered. Leora skidded to a halt, the rest of the team pulling up beside her. We need to communicate somehow. Let them know we're not here to cause trouble. Sure, Kelly said dryly, because that worked so well the first time. Look, Sykes interrupted, we need some kind of universal signal, something that says we come in peace without needing to bust out the glow sticks. A dance-off, Jax suggested, only half joking. We've already got the rhythm section on our tail. Kelly rolled her eyes. Right. Because nothing says peaceful exploration like challenging a bunch of aliens to a dance battle. Leora sighed, running a hand through her hair. Well, if anyone's got a better idea, I'm all ears. As if on cue, the ground shook with another surge of energy, the crystals around them pulsing ominously. Whatever the Xythans had planned, it was clear they were just getting started. Their movements were becoming more frantic, the air alive with the crackle of tension. All right, Leora said, squaring her shoulders. We can't keep running. They need to see we're not here to fight. And how do we do that? Sykes asked. Preferably without getting vaporized in the process. Leora paused, eyes scanning the clearing. We stand our ground. Show them we're unarmed and hope they don't decide to turn us into interstellar pinatas. Solid plan, Jax said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Can't see how this could possibly go wrong. Kelly nodded, jaw set. Guess it's as good a time as any to find out if they are open to negotiation. Taking a deep breath, Leora stepped forward, arms outstretched to show they meant no harm. The others followed suit, forming a loose line. It was a ridiculous, desperate gesture, but sometimes that's all they had. The Xiathans approached cautiously, their leader, Good All Commander Zarlix, moving with that same predatory grace. The air was thick with unspoken tension, like the universe was holding its breath, just waiting to see which way the scales would tip. Here goes nothing, Sykes muttered under his breath. Zarlix stopped, a mere dozen feet away, eyes fixed on Leora. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Then, with an elegance that belied the situation, he began to move, an intricate series of motions that spoke of command and authority. Leora watched, trying to piece together meaning from the alien dance. I think he's asking why we're here, she guessed, glancing at the others. Or maybe he's just welcoming us to the neighborhood, Jax suggested. With a death threat. Well, whatever he's doing, Kelly said, we need to show we understand, that we're not a threat. Leora nodded, stepping forward. She mirrored Zarlix's movements as best she could, trying not to feel too foolish in the process. It was either that or risk a serious diplomatic faux pas, assuming they hadn't already crossed that line. Zarlix paused, head tilted slightly, and for a moment Leora thought she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Understanding. Amusement. It was hard to tell, but it was something. Encouraged, Leora continued, gesturing to her team, then back to the forest. We mean no harm, she said, though she doubted the words made any impact. We're just here to learn. The Xiathans watched, unmoving, as if evaluating this strange attempt at communication. Around them, the forest seemed to hold its breath, the tension barely contained. Then, slowly, Zarlix lowered his arms. The rest of the Xiathans followed suit, the aggressive energy dissipating like morning mist. It wasn't an outright declaration of peace, but it was a start. Well, Sykes said, relief evident in his voice, I guess that could have gone worse. Don't jinx it, Jax replied, though he sounded just as relieved. Leora lowered her arms, letting out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Let's not push our luck, we still need to find a way to communicate properly. Agreed, Kelly said, glancing at the Xiathans. But at least now we know they're willing to listen. Or at least not immediately disintegrate us, Jax amended. For the moment, peace, fragile and tenuous, seemed to have settled over the clearing. The Xiathans remained vigilant, watching the humans with an intensity that suggested their next move would be critical. Leora turned to her team, a determined set to her jaw. We need to regroup, figure out our next steps. Communication's key, and we need to find a way to make it work. Sykes nodded, already thinking ahead. Maybe we can modify the scanners to translate their movements into something we can understand. Right, Kelly agreed. Assuming we're not just reading more dance lessons into their every move. Jax chuckled, though the sound was tinged with fatigue. Whatever it takes, right? Maybe we'll even learn some new steps. Leora couldn't help but smile despite the circumstances. It was grim, yes, and the future was uncertain, but for the first time since landing on this crystalline nightmare, she felt a glimmer of hope. Let's move, she said, turning away from the clearing. We've got work to do. As they made their way back through the forest, the crystal paths gleaming underfoot, Leora couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Xiathans were a mystery, and unraveling that mystery would be no small feat. But they'd faced worse odds before, and they hadn't come this far just to give up now. Think the Xiathans are still planning a surprise party for us? Jax asked, his tone light. Probably, Kelly replied. But hopefully we've at least convinced them not to spike the punch. Sykes grinned. One thing's for sure, this mission's gonna make one hell of a report back to command. Leora laughed, the sound buoyed by relief and the camaraderie of her team. They might be up against the universe's most interpretive defense system, but at least they were in it together. And as they vanished into the depths of the forest, the sunlight filtering down in patches. Leora couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, they'd find a way to make this work. Leora Voss squinted through the shimmering haze of Viridia's crystal forest, a landscape that looked like someone had taken a giant disco ball and smashed it into a million sparkly shards. It was the sort of place that would make a poet weep with joy or an explorer cry with frustration, which was precisely what her crew seemed to be doing at the moment. Crying, that is, not weeping poetically. "All right, team," Leora said, checking the ancient compass in her hand. "Time to figure out how we're going to use this glittery hellhole to our advantage. Assuming it doesn't use us first," Sykes quipped, fiddling with his trusty but often useless scanner. The device was currently resembling a confused kaleidoscope, more interested in making pretty patterns than providing any useful data. "Relax, Sykes," Jack said, stretching his arms like he was warming up for a marathon. "We've got the universe's most fabulous obstacle course right here. I say we double down on the whole invincible human spirit trope and start improvising." Kelly snorted, shifting her grip on her weapon. "Yeah, because nothing screams master tactician like winging it in an alien death trap." Leora grinned despite herself. There was something comforting about having a crew that could banter their way through imminent peril. "All right, Jax," she said. "You've got the floor. What's your grand plan?" Jax glanced around, taking in the jagged crystal formations that jutted from the ground like nature's own punji sticks. "We use the crystals," he said. "They reflect light, right? Maybe we can use that to mess with the Zyathan's visuals. Play a little hide and seek." "Brilliant," Sykes said, still prodding the scanner. "Except for the small fact that the Zyathan's aren't blind idiots. They'll probably spot us faster than you can say poor life choices." "Maybe," Jax admitted, "but they are not expecting it. Plus, we're not exactly overflowing with options here." Leora nodded. "It's not the worst idea I've heard today," she said. "And if it buys us some time to figure out how to talk to them without getting our heads ripped off, I'm all for it." "Ripped off and probably used as a dance prop," Kelly added with a grim chuckle. "Those moves could definitely use some heads." They set about gathering the materials, each member of the team contributing their own brand of creativity to the mix. Jax found ways to angle the crystals so they caught the sun just right, setting up what could only be described as a low-budget laser show. Meanwhile, Kelly tested their defensive capabilities, swinging her weapon experimentally at the crystalline walls to see if they could withstand an assault. The resulting clangs echoed through the forest, sounding like an avant-garde percussion ensemble. Sykes, on the other hand, was more interested in tweaking the scanner to function as a crude communication device. "If I can get this thing to emit frequencies the Zyathan's might recognize," he explained, "we might have a shot at signaling them without needing to break into interpretive dance ourselves." "Because that would just be embarrassing," Jax said, directing a beam of light into Sykes' eyes, earning a glare in return. "Keep it up and I'll see how these crystals handle a real test," Sykes threatened, though his smile suggested he was only half serious. "Besides, we need to keep our heads in the game. No time for disco right now." "If they don't kill us, our own reflections might," Kelly said, eyeing the blinding reflections with a sigh. They worked in tense cooperation, every joke tinged with the undercurrent of their precarious situation. Each improvised tool was a step toward survival, a makeshift lifeline in a world that seemed hell-bent on breaking them. Hours passed, the sun arcing through the sky with its typical Viridian intensity, casting longer shadows and making the crystal forest even more dazzling and dangerous. Finally, they stood back to assess their handiwork, a bizarre setup of light-bending crystals and strategically placed gear that looked more like a postmodern art installation than a defensive measure. "All right, people," Leora said, clapping her hands together. "Moment of truth. Everyone knows their roles. Blinding the locals with our sheer improvisational genius," Jax suggested. "Let's hope it's enough," Sykes muttered, adjusting his scanner until it emitted a low hum. "And pray they don't just decide to go full War of the Worlds on us." As if on cue, a distant rustle echoed through the forest, a sound that could only mean one thing. The Xythans were coming, their interpretive wrath as inevitable as taxes and bad haircuts. The team took their positions, ready to test their hastily concocted scheme. The air vibrated with tension, the kind that made one's skin prickle and heart race. Only a thin line of crystals and hope separated them from an untimely demise. The Xythans appeared, their forms flickering through the trees like specters, making the humans' apparent stand all the more ludicrous. Leora took a deep breath, trying to project a confidence she didn't feel. "Remember," she whispered to her crew, "we're not just surviving, we're proving something here." "Yeah, that we can screw up with style," Jax said with a wink. The Xythans closed in, their dance a chaotic blend of aggression and artistry. For the briefest moment, Leora could almost appreciate the beauty of it, right before she remembered that a misstep here meant dismemberment. Sykes activated the scanner, sending out a wave of sound that rippled through the crystals, causing the air to vibrate with a strange harmony. It wasn't quite music, but it was enough to give the Xythans pause, their movements faltering as they attempted to make sense of this new development. Jax and Kelly began their part, manipulating the crystals to send blinding reflections toward the Xythans. It was a desperate gamble, but as the beams of light scattered across the clearing, it created an effect that was as bewildering as it was beautiful, a dazzling display of human ingenuity in the face of alien aggression. For a moment that stretched for eternity, the humans and Xythans stood at an impasse, the forest alive with light and sound. Leora could practically taste the tension in the air, her heart drumming a frantic rhythm as she waited for the Xythans to make their move. And then something unexpected happened. The Xythans paused, their leader Zarlik stepping forward. His head tilted, and Leora could swear she saw something in his eyes, a flicker of curiosity, maybe even respect. It was a small victory, but in the grand scheme of things, it felt monumental. The humans weren't disintegrated on the spot, and in the world of interstellar diplomacy, that was as good a sign as any. "Well," Sykes said, not lowering his scanner, "I guess we just bought ourselves a little more time." "Or delayed the inevitable," Kelly pointed out, though her expression was one of cautious optimism. "We'll take what we can get," Leora replied. "As long as we're still breathing, we've got a chance to figure this out." Jax glanced at the Xythans, who had resumed their dance, albeit at a slower, more contemplative pace. "Think they are starting to see us as more than just a pest problem?" he asked. "Maybe," Leora said. "Or maybe we're just a more interesting challenge than they expected. Here's hoping they don't decide to up the ante," Sykes added, eyeing the Xythans warily. Leora nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. They'd managed to hold off disaster for now, but the Xythans were still a mystery, one they needed to unravel if they wanted to avoid another close call. "All right, team," she said, switching gears. "We've got the edge for now, but we need to stay sharp. Keep working on those communication angles and see if we can inch a little closer to understanding what the hell they are trying to tell us." Sykes nodded, already turning back to his scanner. "I'll keep tweaking this thing. Maybe we can catch a break in whatever frequency they are using. Meanwhile," Kelly added, "I'll see what other surprises this forest has in store for us. Never know when we might need another ace up our sleeves. And I'll keep charming the locals," Jax said with a grin, "or at least try not to piss them off any more than we already have." Leora watched them with a mixture of pride and trepidation. They were a ragtag bunch, thrown together by fate and circumstance, but they were her ragtag bunch, and if anyone could turn this mess around, it was them. The forest seemed to settle around them, the crystalline structures casting shifting shadows as the sun dipped lower in the sky. It was a temporary peace, fragile as a spider's web, but it was a peace nonetheless. For now, that was enough. They'd face the next challenge when it came, and they'd do it together, irreverent and stubborn as ever. Because in a universe that seemed determined to break them, there was one thing they had in spades: the sheer, unyielding determination to survive. "All right, everyone," Leora said, her voice steady with resolve. Let's get to work. We've got a puzzle to solve and the clock's ticking. With that, they turned back to their tasks, each movement deliberate, each action a step toward a future that was still uncertain but undeniably worth fighting for. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the Viridian sky, Leora couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope, small, fragile, but fiercely tenacious. It was a start. The air smelled like burnt electronics and failure, which meant it was another day at the office for Captain Leora Voss and her merry band of misfits. The Xythans, having paused their interpretive tantrum, seemed to have pushed the frenzied aggression button on their choreography routine, and it was showtime. The alien spectacle was something between a rave and a riot, with a touch of ballet thrown in for good measure. Leora could only hope it wouldn't end with their delicate human bones as the main event. Think they'd appreciate a standing ovation. Jax mused, fiddling with a crystal to keep the lights as blinding as possible. We could throw in some flowers even. I hear that's how you end a dance recital. Only if you want those flowers shoved down your throat, Kelly muttered, swinging her weapon with a determination that spoke volumes about her days on rougher planets. Gentlemen, ladies, and whatever Sykes identifies as when he's tweaking a scanner, Leora said with mock solemnity, I think it's time to show these locals what a real human performance looks like. And please, let's avoid any flashy disintegration displays on our part. Flashy or not, they're bringing the house down, Sykes grumbled, his scanner now vibrating with the intensity of a toddler on a sugar high. This thing's picking up a surge, a real doozy. I'd bet a week's rations they're calling in more backup. Fantastic. Reinforcements. Just what we needed, Leora said, exhaling sharply. Nothing like being outmatched, outgunned, and out of ideas to really get the adrenaline pumping. Their makeshift light show had bought them a moment or two, but the Xythans' patience was shorter than their attention span, and that was saying something. The forest was lit up like a galactic circus, each crystal a part of a vast, shimmering trap they'd cobbled together with desperation and duct tape. I've got a lovely bunch of coconuts, Sykes quipped under his breath, earning a few chuckles from the team. Gallows humor, the universal bomb for impending doom. The Xythan commander, Zarlix, stepped forward, his limbs forming angles that no sensible limb should. His gestures looked like they belonged more at a modern art exhibit than a battlefield. If they were trying to say, we'll crush you like insects, they were doing a bang-up job of it. We've got incoming on our 6, Kelly reported, eyes narrowing into Hunter's slits as she scanned the moving shadows. More dancers in the wings, folks. The team tightened their ranks, a ragtag collection of scuffs and scowls. Leora took a deep breath, her mind racing through their options like a rat in a maze filled with electrified cheese. All right, listen up, she barked, her voice cutting through the tension. We've got two choices. We can stand here and become a permanent part of the landscape, or we can adapt, improvise, and hope they appreciate a little human creativity. Oh, I'm sure they'll love it. Right up until the point they're tap dancing on our graves, Sykes shot back, adjusting his garbled equipment. Optimism, Sykes, Jax chided, still hard at work making their reflective shield as obnoxious as possible. We've got life and breath in us yet. And frankly, I'm not keen on being remembered as a footnote in the Xythan history of mankind. Curiosity killed the cat, Kelly added grimly. And I don't think satisfaction's bringing us back. Just then, the humming crescendoed to a fever pitch as the Xythans took their positions, a macabre mural of alien resolve. Leora felt her heart skip a beat, then settle into a steady drum roll. It was do or die time, and she'd be damned if she didn't at least give them one hell of a show. On my mark, Leora ordered, her voice carried by the wind, or maybe just the collective will of her crew. Remember, we're not just fighting for our lives. We're fighting to make sure humanity's not remembered as the galaxy's most entertaining speed bump. 3, 2, 1 now. The Xythans surged forward like an avant-garde tsunami, limbs flailing in a terrifying symphony of aggression. The humans retaliated with their own chaotic finesse, turning the forest into a war zone of blinding light and sound. Jax's crystals sizzled with intensity, sending shards of light slicing through the air in a brilliant, disorienting display. The Xythans faltered, their movements stuttering as if they'd forgotten their place in the choreography. It was like watching an elaborate dance-off, except the prize was a little more permanent than a trophy. "Keep him dazzled," Jax yelled, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of battle. "They can't kill what they can't see." "More like they're just enjoying the interstellar light show," Kelly quipped, firing off rounds with grim determination. "But hey, if they're entertained, maybe they'll hesitate to kill us for a few more seconds." The Xythans, however, weren't about to be upstaged by a bunch of scrappy humans. Their ranks surged again, a relentless tide of alien bodies moving with synchronized precision. It was beautiful in a way, if one could appreciate beauty while contemplating the imminent threat of dismemberment. Leora, dodging incoming limbs and the occasional lethal pirouette, found herself face to face with Zarlix. The Xythan leader's eyes bore into hers, a challenge etched in every alien contour. He gestured once more, a flourish that was both elegant and menacing. "Think he wants to ask me to dance?" Leora muttered dryly, sidestepping a particularly enthusiastic swing. "Looks more like he's asking for your resignation," Sykes said, his scanner now emitting a series of shrill, frantic beeps. "We've got to fall back, Leora. We're holding, but it won't last." "Then let's make it count," she replied, her mind spinning through strategies like a failing roulette wheel. "Buy us some more time, Sykes. See if you can get that scanner to mimic whatever frequency they are using to communicate. You want me to flirt with them now?" Sykes deadpanned, fingers flying over the scanner's interface. "Never thought I'd have to sweet-talk an alien horde in my lifetime." "Just do it," Leora snapped, ducking a wild, flailing appendage. "And make sure they think we're the galaxy's most interesting puzzle, not just another pest to squash." The battle raged on, each moment a precarious balancing act between survival and annihilation. The forest seemed to pulse with life, reflecting the chaos in every prismatic gleam. It was a spectacle of madness, and Leora had to admit if they survived, they'd have one hell of a story to tell. "Done," Sykes shouted, holding up the scanner like a talisman. "It's a long shot, but I've got it broadcasting on a wavelength the Xythans might recognize." "Perfect," Leora said, adrenaline fueling her every move. "Now, let's see if they are in the mood for a little conversation instead of carnage." As if sensing this change in the wind, Zarlix paused, his movements faltering as the scanner's signal rippled through the air. The other Xythans followed suit, their frenetic dance losing its deadly edge. For a heartbeat, it seemed as though the forest held its breath, the silence a fragile promise of ceasefire. But the universe, ever the fickle mistress, had never been one to indulge in happily ever afters. Not without a little more bloodshed, at least. "Looks like we've got their attention," Jax said, his voice a mix of exhaustion and relief. "Now let's hope they don't decide to finish what they started." Leora nodded, her gaze locking with Zarlix's once more. There was something in his eyes, a spark of recognition perhaps, or the realization that maybe, just maybe, these humans weren't so different from his own kind. "Let's keep this conversation going," she said, her voice steady even as her heart raced. "We've got to make them see us as equals, not enemies." "Easier said than done," Kelly muttered, eyes scanning the still tense ranks of Xythans. "But I'm all for trying anything that doesn't involve becoming a permanent fixture in their choreography." As the last rays of the Viridian sun faded into twilight, the stalemate held. It was an uneasy truce, but it was a truce nonetheless, a testament to the stubbornness and sheer audacity of the human spirit. They'd bought themselves time, a commodity as precious as air in this perilous place. But the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The Xythans were still an enigma wrapped in a dance routine, and the path to peace was as convoluted as their alien choreography. "All right, team," Leora said, her voice a rallying cry in the gathering dusk. "We've held the line, but we're not done yet. Keep your wits about you and let's see if we can't turn this into something other than a last stand." With that, they returned to their positions, weary but undaunted. The future loomed uncertain, a shadowy specter in the darkening forest. But amidst the chaos and confusion, Leora felt a glimmer of hope, a spark that refused to be extinguished. Because in the end they were human, and no matter the odds, they'd fight to the bitter end, their irreverence and tenacity as unyielding as the stars themselves. Leora Voss clung to the notion that desperation and adaptability were humanity's greatest weapons, right behind sarcasm and misplaced optimism. As the Xiathan forces hesitated, she saw a fleeting opportunity, thin as a hairline fracture in a diamond but there nonetheless. "All right, team, listen up." She barked over the hum of the forest, her voice slicing through the uncertainty like a knife through cheap protein rations. "We're going to use this crystal forest against them." Sykes glanced at her as if she'd suggested they dance ballet in zero gravity. "The forest? You mean the one filled with angry aliens and more reflective surfaces than a narcissist's dream house?" "Exactly that one," Leora replied with a wry grin. "We've got to think outside the box, or outside the rock formation in this case. We're going to turn these crystals into a laser light show they'll never forget." "Great. So death by disco ball," Jax mumbled, fiddling with his crystals. "Just what I wanted as my epitaph. Better than died in an interpretive dance-off," Kelly quipped, eyes still scanning the shimmering forest for signs of movement. "What's the plan, Leora? The crystals amplify light, right?" Leora continued, her mind racing faster than a hyperdrive on caffeine. "We use Jax's crystal matrix to create a focused beam, something strong enough to disorient them long enough for us to make a run for it." Jax raised an eyebrow. "You want me to turn these things into a death ray? We're not exactly sitting on a power plant, you know. Just enough power to confuse them, not vaporize them," Leora clarified. "We're aiming for a tactical retreat, not intergalactic genocide." "Right, because nothing says we come in peace like blinding an alien race with their own geology," Sykes muttered, still tapping at his scanner. "Do you have a better idea?" Leora shot back, a hint of challenge in her voice. "Not unless you count curling into a fetal position and hoping they get bored," he replied, grinning despite himself. "All right, let's stop aimlessly yapping and start making this happen," Kelly interrupted, her voice like a whip crack. "Jax, start setting up your crystal tech. I'll cover you." Jax nodded, getting to work with the dexterity of a man used to making miracles out of spare parts. He moved quickly, connecting his crystals with a series of wires that looked more suited to a forgotten toaster than a military operation. "So we're basically building a giant flashlight?" Sykes asked, peering over Jax's shoulder. "If it works, I'll knight you on the spot," Jax replied, not missing a beat. "If it doesn't work, at least we'll die with sunglasses on," Kelly said, half joking, half serious, her weapon still trained on the forest's edge. Overhead, the sky darkened, the sun dipping below the alien horizon like a curtain falling on a particularly grim play. The Xiathans, for their part, resumed their inscrutable posing, resembling a synchronized swimming team pulled from a nightmare. Zarlix, their leader, stood at the forefront, his expression unreadable, which was impressive given how much of his face seemed to be made of pincers and mandibles. Leora was about to give up trying to gauge his mood when his limbs began to undulate again, a new dance that looked suspiciously like impatience. "Showtime's over, folks," Leora said, urgency creeping into her voice. "Jax, how are we looking?" "Almost there," he replied, wrapping up his makeshift array with a flourish. "Just need a bit of power to get this baby humming." Sykes tossed him a power cell with the nonchalance of a man who'd done this a dozen times before. "Try not to blow us to kingdom come." "Yeah, no promises," Jax said, grinning as he plugged the cell in. The crystals flared to life with a dazzling intensity, casting prismatic patterns across the forest, a beauty made all the more terrifying by what it signaled. "All right, Jax, light it up," Leora ordered, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline, that heady cocktail of fear and excitement. Jax activated the array, and a concentrated beam of light shot out, slicing through the gloom like a celestial sword. It hit the crystals around them, refracting and multiplying into a blinding spectacle that would put any interstellar rave to shame. The Xythans recoiled, their movements no longer the graceful arcs of aggression but the haphazard stumbles of creatures caught mid-step. Zarlix's limbs flailed, the alien leader momentarily blinded by the brilliance. "Move! Now!" Leora shouted, seizing the moment. The team sprinted through the forest, ducking and dodging the light show they'd unleashed. It was chaos, but it was their chaos, and they rode it like seasoned storm chasers. "Keep tight, don't straggle," Kelly barked, covering their movement with precision shots. Sykes glanced back, almost colliding with a crystal in the process. "Remind me to nominate us for the Galaxy's Got Talent when we get out of this, if we get out of this." Jax shot back, winded but laughing, the sound wild and free in the midst of their mad dash. They ran, the sound of their boots pounding the alien ground a steady counterpoint to the frantic hum of the forest. Behind them, the Xythans struggled to regain their composure, caught off guard by the sheer audacity of the move. Leora didn't look back. Looking back was for people who wanted to become statues. She focused on the path ahead, the ancient compass in her hand whirring faintly, guiding them through the labyrinthine terrain. "Left here," she called, veering sharply into a narrow corridor of crystal arches. The path was tight, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through one at a time, but it would slow the Xythans down even more. They burst out into a clearing, the open sky above a welcome sight after the tense claustrophobia of the crystal corridors. Leora skidded to a halt, her team gathering around her, breathless but alive. "Well, that was fun," Sykes panted, doubling over with his hands on his knees. "Can't say I've ever blinded an entire alien species before breakfast. When we're back on the ship, I'm giving you all a commendation," Leora said, grinning despite the ache in her muscles. "The Managed Not to Die award," Kelly snorted, reloading her weapon with nimble efficiency. "I'll hang mine next to the Didn't Get Eaten by Space Wolves certificate." Jax was already checking his equipment, the light from the crystals fading to a dull glow. "What's next, boss? Do we have a plan for when they come after us again?" Leora nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. "We need to make it to the extraction point. If we keep moving and stay unpredictable, we might just pull this off." "That's a lot of might," Sykes pointed out, his tone more amused than worried. "Better than a lot of definitely dead," Kelly replied, her eyes scanning the skyline for any signs of trouble. They set off again, moving with the practiced coordination of a team that had been through the grinder together. The path ahead was uncertain, but that was just fine. Uncertainty was their bread and butter, the element that kept their minds sharp and their hearts beating. Behind them, the Xythans were regrouping, their dance taking on a new intensity, as if choreographing their next move. Zarlix, though still a distant figure, seemed to be considering his options carefully, perhaps wary of what these unpredictable humans might try next. As they moved, the forest around them began to change. The crystals, now devoid of the light show, reflected the encroaching darkness of the night, casting long shadows that seemed to shift and dance on their own. "We're not out of the woods yet," Leora muttered to herself, glancing back over her shoulder. "Hey, Leora," Jax said, breaking the silence. "What do you think they're gonna do when we make it out of here?" "Probably send us a strongly worded letter," she replied, a smirk tugging at her lips. "Or, never invite us to their dance parties again." Sykes chuckled. "Their loss. We're killer on the floor." They moved quickly, each step taking them closer to their goal. The path was not without its challenges, but they faced them together, their banter a constant companion, a testament to their resilience. Despite the odds, they were still in the game, and as long as they could keep moving, keep thinking, they stood a chance. A slim chance, but a chance nonetheless. Viridia was a harsh mistress with its blinding sun and hostile locals, but it was also a testament to the resilience of those who dared traverse its treacherous terrain. Leora's gut told her that they were far from the end of their troubles, but they'd endure, just like they always did. As the forest receded behind them and the horizon beckoned with the promise of escape, Leora allowed herself a moment to appreciate her team. They were a ragtag bunch of outcasts, misfits and survivors, but they were hers. And together they were unstoppable. This was not the end of their story. It was merely the beginning of another chapter. A chapter filled with danger, camaraderie, and the grim determination to survive. Because in this universe, adaptability was everything, and Leora Voss and her crew were nothing if not adaptable. They'd dance with danger until the music stopped, and when it did, they'd be ready to face whatever came next. One mad scramble at a time. The Viridian sky was a kaleidoscope of chaos, which was just another Tuesday for Leora Voss and her motley crew of misfits. The Zyathans, previously engaged in what appeared to be a mix between a violent game of Twister and an interpretive dance-off, were now stumbling around like toddlers at a birthday party where someone had spiked the punch. "Did we just win a war with a flashlight?" Sykes asked, incredulous, as he wiped sweat from his brow. "Feels like we just pulled the cosmic equivalent of pointing and yelling 'Look, a distraction,'" Leora smirked, the adrenaline still thrumming through her veins. "Hey, never underestimate the power of light in a well-timed existential crisis." Jax, still tinkering with his contraption, chuckled. "And here I thought we'd need to invent a new weapon. Turns out we just needed to show them the light, literally." Kelly kept her weapon trained on the forest, eyes sharp. "If this doesn't get us a permanent spot in the history books, I don't know what will. But let's not start posing for statues yet. This is Viridia, not Vegas." The Zyathans, led by the ever-dramatic Commander Zarlix, were a sight to behold. Their limbs fluttered and shook, trying to shield themselves from the light's bombardment. The commander himself seemed to be engaged in a new dance of confusion, perhaps titled "What the Hell Just Happened?" "Well, we certainly know how to make an entrance," Jax said, packing the equipment with practiced efficiency. "What's next?" "We knock and ask if they want to go out for drinks." Leora rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a grin. "One disaster at a time. First, we get to that extraction point. Then we figure out how to explain all this without getting court-martialed into oblivion." As the team forged ahead, the forest seemed to grow quieter, the chaos behind them gradually fading. It was as if Viridia itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what these audacious humans would do next. Zarlix, on the other hand, wasn't content to let them slip away without a word, or a dance as the case may be. His limbs suddenly stopped flailing and instead moved with a deliberate, almost hesitant grace, a new choreography in the making. The rest of the Zyathans followed suit, their movements slowing, becoming less frenetic and more cohesive. Leora, aware of the change, paused, her team halting in unison. She watched, a frown creasing her forehead. "Hold up, something's different." "Different how?" Kelly asked, eyes narrowing at the aliens. "They were doing the get the hell out of here dance," Leora said. "Now it looks like the we come in peace shuffle." Sykes snorted. "Or maybe the please don't blind us again jig." "Must be a hell of a misunderstanding," Jax said, shaking his head. "Maybe they think we're some kind of light gods now." Leora considered this, the irony not lost on her. "Gods or not, we've got their attention. Let's see if we can translate this before they decide to go back to the aggressive waltz." The team regrouped, setting up a defensive perimeter just in case Zarlix's next dance involved more than interpretive motion. With a deep breath, Leora stepped forward, a universal translator strapped to her wrist, its capabilities dubious at best. "Let's hope this thing does more than just mangle their language," she murmured, tapping the device. The translator whirred to life with a hum that didn't inspire much confidence. Zarlix and his cohort had stopped moving entirely, a silent audience as Leora began her own dance, a verbal one. "Commander Zarlix," she started, her voice steady, "I think we've all had enough of the light show. How about we talk this out?" The translator sputtered, converting her words into a series of awkward mechanical chirps and clicks, none of which sounded remotely promising. Zarlix tilted his head, the gesture somehow managing to convey skepticism through his exoskeleton. Well, if that doesn't work, we could always try miming, Sykes suggested deadpan. Leora shot him a look. Not helping. To everyone's surprise, Zarlix stepped forward, his limbs carefully choreographed in what looked like a hesitant truce dance. The translator, finally finding its rhythm, emitted a series of smoother clicks and tones. "Human leader," it translated, "your luminescent display has illuminated our misunderstanding. We believed you to be invaders, yet you wield the light as we do, a sign of knowledge." Sykes whispered to Kelly, "So, blinding them was a compliment. Wish someone told my driving instructor that." Leora ignored him, focusing on the breakthrough. "We came in peace," she replied, hoping the translator captured the sentiment without turning it into a proposition for galactic domination. "Our light wasn't meant as a weapon, merely a means to an end." Zarlix's limbs twitched, the Zyathan equivalent of a nod. "Your resourcefulness rivals the great dance of unity. We misjudged your intentions." "Great," Kelly muttered. "Can we get this in writing?" "Maybe a nice intergalactic peace treaty," Leora sighed, relief washing over her as the tension of the last Iors began to dissipate. "Let's just focus on not getting shot at, Kelly." Zarlix's next movements were more brisk, purposeful, a dance of resolution. "We offer a truce, human leader. Let us exchange knowledge, not blows." Jax, ever the optimist, leaned in. "Does this mean we get invited to their next dance recital?" Leora grinned, feeling the weight of their narrow escape lift. "If it comes with a free drink, count me in." With the Zyathan threat neutralized and the misunderstanding cleared, the team navigated their way through the crystal forest, feeling a strange camaraderie with the alien race they'd almost gone to war with. It was a resolution that teetered on the absurd, but then again, that was space for you, nothing if not unpredictable. As they approached their extraction point, the tension seemed to ease further, replaced by the kind of weary satisfaction that comes with surviving another day. Their mission was technically a success, though how they'd explain it to their superiors without sounding like a group of lunatics was a problem for another day. "Guess this means we won't have to spend the rest of our days dodging alien dance-offs," Sykes said as they settled at the extraction zone, the ship's outline visible against the darkening sky. "Unless you count the mandatory debrief," Kelly added. "That's bound to feel like a dance-off with the brass." Jax laughed, packing up the last of his equipment. "Right. So what was your tactical plan?" "Well, sir, have you ever heard of a disco ball?" Leora leaned against a rock, the exhaustion creeping in now that the adrenaline high was fading. "I'll take a debrief over a firefight any day." Behind them, Viridia's crystal forest shimmered under the alien moonlight, a silent witness to the day's improbable events. It was a place of beauty and danger, where misunderstandings could escalate to interstellar incidents, and where a little light could go a long way. "Think we'll ever come back here?" Sykes asked, stretching his arms as if trying to shed the day's tension from his body. Leora shrugged. "Only if they promise to keep the light shows to a minimum." The team's transport arrived, the ships hum a welcome sound in the stillness of the night. They boarded, each carrying the weight of their own thoughts, and yet buoyed by the shared knowledge that they'd managed to navigate the storm, both literally and metaphorically. As the ship lifted off, leaving the crystal cathedrals and forests of Viridia behind, Leora allowed herself a small smile. They'd survived, again. And as long as there were new planets, new challenges, and new misunderstandings, they'd keep on surviving, one absurd adventure at a time. The universe was vast and mysterious, and if it took a bit of humor and a lot of light to navigate it, then so be it. Leora Voss and her crew would shine on, illuminating the dark corners of the galaxy, one misstep at a time. And if they had to dance with trouble every now and then, well, they'd learn to bring their own music. As they settled into the ship's cockpit, Leora tapped a few buttons with the precision of someone who'd rather be anywhere but here. The hum of the engines was a soothing white noise, like a lullaby for adrenaline junkies. "All right, team," she said, her voice laced with exhaustion, yet laced with dry humor like a bitter cappuccino. "Let's see if we can make it back to base without another intergalactic incident." "Wouldn't bet on it," Sykes answered, plopping into his seat. He peered out the viewport, watching the crystal cathedrals of Viridia twinkle like a city of broken glass. "Who knew our claim to fame would be a light show?" "Sure beats getting blown to bits, I guess." Kelly snorted, cracking open a ration bar with the enthusiasm of someone who'd rather be eating the wrapper. "Speak for yourself. I was kinda looking forward to the fireworks." Jax, still riding the high from their unexpected victory, was tinkering with his contraption. "Yeah, but then you'd have to clean up afterwards. And by clean up, I mean salvage your limbs from across the forest." Leora leaned back in her seat, letting the banter wash over her like a much-needed drink. "You think Zarlix will keep his end of the truce, or do we have to worry about a surprise dance party? Considering how much they loved our flashlight routine, I think we're safe," Jax said. "Besides, I doubt they want to risk another existential crisis." Their moves were getting pretty desperate by the end. The ship broke through Viridia's atmosphere, the vastness of space stretching out before them, endless and indifferent. It was a stark reminder that no matter how many times they survived, the universe had infinite ways to crush them into stardust. "Do you ever wonder if there's a parallel universe where this was all just a bad dream?" Sykes asked, squinting at the stars as if they held the answers. "Sure," Kelly replied, "but I bet they're having a worse time. They've probably got space accountants doing interpretive tax audits." "Sounds terrifying," Jax said with a mock shudder. "I'd take a dance-off over that any day." Leora chuckled, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease just a fraction. "Well, as long as we keep surviving, we might just find out. Let's just hope the galaxy doesn't spin us into another mess before we get back." Their conversation was cut short by a light flashing on the control panel, a message from base. Leora hit the button to play it, expecting a stern lecture or a string of expletives masquerading as orders. "Captain Voss," the voice crackled over the intercom, a blend of annoyance and grudging admiration. "We've received reports of unconventional tactics used on Viridia. Care to explain?" Leora exchanged glances with her crew, each of them barely managing to hold back laughter. "Unconventional. I prefer to think of it as creative problem-solving. Creative or not," the voice continued, "you've managed to open up a dialogue with the Zyathans. Command wants you to pursue this. Opportunity." Sykes smirked. "Opportunity, more like try not to mess it up this time." "Exactly," Leora said, switching off the message. "Looks like we're diplomats now." Who knew pointing a flashlight could lead to interstellar relations? The mood in the cockpit shifted, a collective understanding settling over them. They'd gone from a simple extraction mission to the forefront of human-Zyathan relations, all because they'd gotten a little too carried away with a light show. "Think Zarlix will invite us over for tea?" Jax asked, the glint in his eye suggesting he'd already started planning the logistics for a cross-species tea party. "Maybe," Leora said, "once we figure out how to politely decline their next interpretive dance recital." Kelly snorted. "I'll take a bullet for you, Captain, but I draw the line at interpretive dance." As the ship hurtled through space, the crew fell into a comfortable silence, each lost in their thoughts. It was the calm before the storm, because in their line of work, there was always another storm waiting just beyond the horizon. Hours later, they finally docked back at the base, the clamor of everyday life a welcome contrast to the surreal events of Viridia. The familiarity of metal corridors and recycled air was almost comforting, like slipping into an old, worn-out pair of boots. "Home sweet home," Sykes muttered, stepping out of the ship and stretching as if he'd been crammed into a sardine can for days. Kelly looked around, eyeing the bustling activity with mild disdain. "I'd forgotten how much I hated this place." "Don't get too comfortable," Leora warned, leading the way to debrief. "We've got to convince the brass we didn't just pull a galactic prank." As they marched through the base, Leora felt the weight of command settle back onto her shoulders, a familiar burden she couldn't quite shake. The debrief room loomed ahead, a bland space filled with the promise of endless questions and very few answers. "Ready for the Inquisition?" Jax asked, sidling up beside her with an encouraging nod. "I hear they've got snacks this time." The debrief was as grueling as expected, a barrage of questions punctuated by the occasional raised eyebrow. Leora and her team recounted their mission with a mixture of honesty and strategic omission, painting their actions in the best possible light. "So," the lead interrogator said, flipping through his notes with an air of skepticism, "you're suggesting the Xythans mistook your tactical use of light as a sign of peaceful intent?" "More or less," Leora replied, keeping her tone as diplomatic as she could muster. "Turns out they're more interested in choreography than combat. And you believe this? Truce will hold," Leora shrugged. "As long as we don't blind them again, I'd say we've got a decent chance." The interrogator sighed, clearly unconvinced but equally aware that they'd pulled off something remarkable, however accidental it might have been. "Very well, Captain Voss," he said, dismissing them with a wave. "You're free to go. But don't get too comfortable. Command wants you and your team ready for redeployment. We're not done with the Xythans yet." "Oh, joy," Sykes muttered as they filed out of the room. "Just when I thought we could retire on a beach somewhere." "Cheer up," Kelly said, nudging him with her elbow. "Think of it as an extended vacation, just with more aliens and fewer cocktails." Their brief respite was just that, brief. Before they knew it, they were back on the ship, prepping for another mission. Viridia loomed in their future, a place of potential alliances and potential chaos. As they settled into their seats, Leora couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation. The unknown was terrifying, sure, but it was also exhilarating. It was what kept them moving forward, one misstep at a time. "Ready for round two?" Jax asked, his fingers already dancing over the controls with eager anticipation. Leora grinned, a mix of exhaustion and excitement sparking in her eyes. "Bring it on. We've got a galaxy to explore, dance recitals and all." And with that they were off, hurtling through the stars towards whatever madness awaited them next. The universe was vast, mysterious, and filled with endless possibilities. And as long as they had each other, and a good flashlight, Leora was pretty sure they could handle whatever the cosmos threw their way. 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 Their way.